Good evening and thank you for watching. My name is Kyra Haas. I'm the Education and Courts reporter for the Arizona Capitol Times, and I'll be the moderator for this evening's debate. The Citizens Clean Elections Commission is the sponsor for this event. As the state's voter education agency, Clean Elections hosts debates so voters have the opportunity to hear directly from candidates, ask questions on the issues that matter most to them, and vote informed. Candidates that have a contested primary election have been invited to participate in the debate. Candidates that have opted into the Clean Elections Clean Funding Program are required to participate, while traditional candidates are invited and encouraged to attend. Please note, candidates from both the Senate and the House may be participating in the debate tonight. When voting in a primary election, voters are choosing between the candidates of the same political party, so their preferred nominee may advance to the general election. As the moderator, I will ensure candidates have the opportunity to engage directly with their respective opponents. The questions that will be asked this evening are coming directly from voters. Leading up to the debates, Clean Elections conducted outreach to voters across the state, asking for questions for the candidates. Additionally, Clean Elections surveyed voters to learn what issues are most important to them. This survey data, along with input from the experienced journalists at the Arizona Capitol Times, Arizona Agenda, and Green Valley News and Sahuarita Sun, have been utilized to guide the discussions of what best serves voters. Of course, we want to hear directly from you, the voter. So, voters that are watching this debate live, you can submit a question anytime by emailing debates@kc-a.com, texting 480-808-1814, or calling 480-937-1253. And please specify if your question is for a specific candidate or for all candidates. We screen the questions for clarity to eliminate duplication, speeches, or personal attacks on candidates. This debate is scheduled for an hour, so we may not get to all audience questions, but we will do our best. Candidates, you have 1 minute for your opening and closing statements, and 1 to 2 minutes for your responses to voter questions. We encourage an open exchange of dialogue between opponents. If you feel the need to respond to another candidate's comments, you may do so. I may limit the responses for time management purposes, and we remind the candidates and the audience that this is a respectful, courteous, and professional environment. Our goal tonight is to connect candidates and voters so our electorate may vote informed. Tonight, we'll be hearing from 3 Democratic candidates who are running for the State House. We have Richard Andrade, Natasha Chavez, and Lisa Sun. The order in which the candidates will speak has been determined by alphabetical order by last name for opening comments, and then we'll progress from there. Mr. Andrade, will you start the opening remarks, please?
Yes, Kyra, thank you so much for that introduction. But more importantly, I am running for State Senate, LD22, not State House, LD22 State Senate. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the Clean Elections for hosting these debates. More importantly is my name is Richard Andrade. I'm originally from Winslow, Arizona. I'm a 3rd-generation railroader, a blue-collar worker, a certified locomotive engineer with BNSF Railroad for the last 28 years. I'm a union dues-paying member, an Air Force veteran, and I am married to Sally Andrade, who is a breast cancer survivor. And I was first elected into office at the State House in 2015, and I am termed out, so I am serving my final term in office with 8 years at the legislature. So once again, I'd like to thank you, Kyra, for hosting this, and more importantly, because this is important to let our voters know who we are and how we stand on certain issues.
Great, and then Ms. Chavez.
Great. Natasha Chavez, I'm running for the State House in LD22. Once again, thank you to the Clean Elections for hosting this event. A little bit about myself. My father is a Navy veteran, and I was born in Guam. My mother is from a French Caribbean island of the island Guadeloupe. It's part of France. I've been raised in Arizona most of my life, and my kids are born in Arizona, and they've been born and raised in Arizona and in West Phoenix. They've been raised in West Phoenix as well. And a little bit about myself. I've been a community advocate most of my adulthood, from fighting on the front lines of advocating on various issues, anything that will talk about the common man, working class issues, making sure that people are seen and heard. One of the reasons why I'm running is I believe it's time for diversity. We need more women and moms in there. That's another reason why I love seeing Lisa running as well. I love that we have multiple women running. Also, as a Black woman as well, there's that diversity. And also, I think it's time for bold voices that will stand up for the issues of District 22.
And Ms. Sun.
Thank you. My name is Lisa Sun. I am running for the State House of Representatives for LD 22. As Ms. Chavez has mentioned, being a single mom and being out here in the community day in and day out, I see firsthand the struggles of our local community members, such as immigrants and those that are marginalized. Not only do I feel and understand what they're going through, but I have stayed active in our community. And as a result, I was featured in the Arizona Capital Times as one of the faces of Arizona, which was such an honor. Thank you. But mostly I want to thank our community for bringing all of us together and to fight a good fight with those that don't have our best interests at heart, particularly our elected officials. And that's why I've decided to run. Not only have I decided to run, but I've decided to dig into my heels, go into the trenches and fight the Republican Party at the community level. And I can't wait to be elected, and I look forward to this debate. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. So continuing with that, we'll start with Ms. Chavez for this next question. Governor Doug Ducey won office pledging to cut state income taxes down to as close to zero as possible. Yet voters also approved Proposition 208, which raised income taxes on the wealthy to better fund education. What are voters telling policymakers with these votes, and at what rate do you think Arizona should tax income?
Well, what voters are telling elected officials is that we want public education fully funded, and that we also want the wealthy in Arizona to pay their fair share. And unfortunately, we have elected officials who are being supported by the Arizona Chamber of Commerce, and the Arizona Chamber of Commerce has been known to go against Prop 208. And that's why I pledge not to take any money from folks who worked with the chamber or support the chamber. I believe when it comes to tax rate, I believe what Prop 208 was trying to do is what we should be doing. We should be taxing the wealthy to the extent that they will be able to pay their fair share and help fund public education.
Ms. Sun?
I think the tax rates right now is just a scam to dismantle our public schools and to do a tax break for the wealthy. In terms of what percentage that should be, I would definitely like to see the full budget before it's being brought to the legislature floor, and also have the input from both parties. I mean, that's what we are supposed to have. That's by design. But under the guise of the Republican Party, we are so limited in that input. So as far as the tax number, I'm not really particularly sure about the exact numbers, but we will definitely fight tooth and nail to make sure that our taxes are being paid by the wealthy, and they shouldn't have any further tax breaks.
And Mr. Andrade.
Yes, thank you, Kyra. First of all, let's take a look at what Prop 208 actually was. It was a citizen initiative for many educators and many people who publicly supported public education, went out and got signatures. And of course, the legislature, being the majority of the GOP, did not like that. And what they did was they implemented, as you remember, the flat tax last session to circumvent Prop 208, because the voters have already said by majority that we want to make sure that we're paying into public education, because since I've been there for the last 8 years, there has been one corporate tax cut after another. The kicker about all the tax cuts is we do not know if they are really effective, that they're really doing what they're supposed to be doing. And colleagues have introduced legislation, which is not heard because we're not in the majority, to see which tax cuts are working and which ones are not working. So over the years, because as a result, today we are seeing a $5.3 billion surplus in our revenues. And once again, today, the skinny budget died. And why did it die? Because they're not meeting our needs for the state of Arizona, one of them being public education. These corporations and big companies are not asking for these tax breaks. We're just giving them in order to bring on more. And at the end of the day, what it comes down to is they're not asking for these. But one thing we always hear about, that they need a skilled workforce. We all know what that translates into. They need an educated workforce. So we're not meeting the demands of these companies. And on top of that, they're not asking for it. And then we have a big surplus. I mean, it's like the dominoes are all falling and everything, to where we're seeing what's going on when it comes to public education. And once again, one of the things that they're trying to do is pass more ESA expansion. And voters, once again, that we do not want to expand the ESAs. So the legislature is not doing what the majority of the voters are saying they want done when it comes to public education funding. So this is why running great candidates, progressive candidates, is really important, so we can fight against these things. Because I have not been silent about a lot of these tax cuts that we have no idea which are, because we know who's not benefiting, which is public education.
See, we had a question come in from someone who's watching. They said, do you support the idea of defunding the police? If so, how will that affect the communities of LD 22? And we will start with Ms. Sun.
I think by definition, defunding the police, what does that entail? For me, it's more about reallocation. We know that in various cities such as Tempe, the large majority of their budget goes to law enforcement. Is that necessary? And how is that for the ROI, return on the investment, particularly in our communities? Does it make us safer? So to answer the question, to defund the police, I would say we need to reallocate to make sure the money is evenly spread within the community that are in need, such as the homeless. That will decrease the prison system. Are the crimes being reduced? If so, how is it being reduced? And to share best practices, and then allocate the money there for resources to continue those positive results. So defunding, we need to the original budget. What's the allocation? Is it too great? Does it minimize other needs that we need in our communities?
Mr. Andrade.
Yes, thank you so much, Kyra, for a great question. Because we're asked this all the time and everything. Because I've talked to law enforcement via the legislature. One thing is that we always hear is that if we defund the police, what that's going to end up doing is cutting their training programs. And the thing we need is more training. We need them to start implementing de-escalation training, more of that. We need more resources in our communities. Like when they're responding to a call, do we need a police officer? Do we need a counselor at the court to talk to these people and everything? Do we need more police out in the street? Well, and we see what's going on in our districts, and those should be left up to local law enforcement. What we really need to be talking about is accountability and transparency within the police departments when there is a shooting. Because I did have a good friend who was shot and killed by the police. And when you talk to the parents and ask, okay, what are the circumstances? What led to it? A lot of times the police do not de-escalate. One thing I strongly believe in is that we need more training among our police officers. And do we need to cut some of their funding? Yes, but a also saying, hey, you know what? The majority of your funding is going to go for training as well. Because the younger generation wants more transparency and accountability, which I'm totally on board. When it comes to our older generation, they say, hey, we want more police and everything, because we see some of the things that are going on, such as street racing, which is really bad here in the district. And introducing legislation to address that is the way to go and everything, to address the street racing and everything that's going on associated with street racing. But once again, we need to hold our police departments accountable. We need to hold the bad officers accountable. We do not need more legislation to protect the bad police officers, which is what we see at the legislature time after time, which happens to go through one of the committees I sit on, which is Military Affairs and Public Safety. We do not need to protect police officers, the bad ones and everything. We need to protect the good ones, yes. We need to recognize the good ones, yes. And we also need to start addressing something that they're subject to, which I call PTSD. Why? Our police officers are not getting the services that they need as well to address their PTSD. And when they're involved in one incident after another, because of the demands of everything, they too are suffering. But at the end of the day, when it comes to our communities, we need more services in our communities to address a lot of the issues, especially when it comes to counseling. And that also starts from the schools, putting more counselors to, because we do have a school to prison pipeline, and we need to stop that. We need to make sure that we're investing more into our communities through other agencies that can address these issues that we're faced with every day.
Ms. Chavez?
I definitely believe in re-examining their budget, also reallocating as well. There are definitely some needs. I've spoken to voters who have talked about how recently the city of Phoenix has cut the community officers. So that's an issue. Another issue is folks have talked about safety. So we need to re-examine, what does safety look like? People want to feel safe, but they also want to feel that there's not, that their communities and neighborhoods are not surrounded by cops all the time. So we need to understand and re-examine what that looks like. We need to make sure that people are feeling safe. And sometimes in our neighborhoods, in our district, people don't always feel safe when they see a strong police presence. But they also want to make sure that the police are there when they call them. Also, there's like other folks have talked about, have counselors come for non-emergencies. So we do need to also have transparency and figure out ways to de-escalate when things can lead to de-escalation. So yeah, I maybe wouldn't say the word defund, but there definitely needs to be a re-examining on how we treat the budget for police.
And Mr. Andrade, you mentioned empowerment scholarship accounts. I wanted to go back to that really quickly. The empowerment scholarship accounts allow students to use taxpayer money that would ordinarily go to a public school to attend private school instead, though currently only specific groups can access these ESAs. And you already answered this question, but I want to hear from the other candidates as well. Do you think ESA should be expanded in any way? And would you vote to eliminate the ESA program if you could?
So ESAs are here to stay. We know that and everything, but we need to curtail it. We need to, to completely eliminate it and everything. Well, that should be on a case-by-case basis. One thing I've always said, we do not need more ESA expansion. We need to put that money back into our public schools, because our public schools were designed to educate for every student. And realistically, who are the ESAs benefiting? It's not benefiting anybody within the district, because we're giving money for these parents to be able to send their kids to a private, and a lot of times a for-profit private school. And when you're talking, because one day I looked it up, Brophy Prep, who's, what they charge per semester, and then we're handing them a scholarship account. Those are not the working families that are able to send, because they still have to pay a large amount of money as well. They're not benefiting from ESAs. So once again, let's throw those resources back into the classrooms and everything. let's stop all, and I want to make sure I'm clear on this. Let's make sure we stop all ESA expansion and start investing more into our public schools. And if we need to eliminate ESAs by throwing more resources back into our public schools, then we've solved the problem on even why we need ESAs.
Ms. Chavez?
No, I don't believe in expanding ESAs whatsoever. ESAs are money that could be going to the public school. When people are saying that our public schools, or that they're leaving our public schools because it's not in good shape, well, if we have this money that are going to the ESAs, well, we could be fixing our schools, whatever the issue is. If it's you know, the size of the classroom, or more teachers, if it's outdated books, all of that could be solved by cutting down and limiting the scope of the ESAs. I'm not sure if getting rid of it altogether is the solution. If that came up to a vote, I might consider it, but at the same time, that is probably not a solution here in Arizona. So I would probably just want to limit the scope of ESAs and make sure we just keep our money in public schools.
Ms. Sun?
I would like to abolish ESA. I believe that ESA is a siphon mechanism designed to extrapolate public funding to privatized entities, such as private schools and so forth. And if you look at our school's original design, it was to educate all children, including those with special needs. So the ESA for the last decade or so was at a very, very small percentage. It has ballooned over 1,000-fold to the present day. And as that is occurring, we have other entities attacking our public district schools, such as privatized management companies for charter schools. So there are so many threats and front line that we had to battle. And the last thing we need is a siphoning mechanism that has been creating a manufactured chaos in our lack of funding in our public district schools. So I say abolish all ESAs. They are not necessary.
Okay. This kind of goes along with you all are talking about, how you want to see more money go toward public district schools. Along the same lines, high quality teachers often leave Arizona or leave the profession altogether. And how would you propose keeping them in classrooms? And do you have a plan to attract a new generation of teachers? And we'll start with Ms. Chavez.
One of the things we need to do, first of all, is show our teachers some respect. At the legislature, we constantly see bills where they are told what not to teach, what they can say in classrooms. And also, now this session, we have things like where they want them to post their whole lessons plan for a whole year. That's one of the reasons why teachers aren't staying. Besides pay, they don't feel valued. They don't feel respected. So one, we need to show our teachers some respect. Another one is pay. Pay is definitely an issue here in Arizona. So that is one of the things we need to work on. We have a surplus, so that there's no reason we shouldn't be taking care of our teachers. They are educating our future, so we should show them that respect. Another thing that some of the schools I know do this. I know my children's school district does this with new teachers. If they come in and teach, part of with ASU, they get their it's like I'm not sure if it's exactly loan forgiveness, but they get part of their education paid off. And I think that is what we need, especially in rural districts and in so-called Title I school districts, we need new teachers to teach there. And if they know that their education will be forgiven, I think that's a great incentive. So those are a couple of things that at least I think that are good starting points.
Ms. Sun?
To retain our teachers, our public district schools. We all know that they are underpaid. And yet, with on a 5.3 billion surplus, I can't help but to look at that big stash of money and not have some of that being allocated back into our public district schools and to pay our teachers. They deserve more than respect. They deserve more than we can possibly imagine. They are now ranked the lowest in pay nationally. And we are sitting here on a pile of money. During the pandemic, they were our frontline first responders for our kids via Zoom virtual teaching. I don't know how we would survive this pandemic if it weren't for our teachers. We praise our first responders. We praise our essential workers. And we constantly praise our teachers, but we don't show it without our action. Words don't mean much. I certainly don't want a pat in the back. I want my due pay, and our teachers deserve their pay and then some. So if you want our teachers, we have plenty of them. We have so many great teachers. If you want them to come back, give them our tax money, our property taxes, and reallocate some of that surplus, please. That's to Governor Doug Ducey.
And Mr. Andrade?
Yes, thank you, Kyra. Our teachers, they're not given any love by the state, and we all know that. I mean, being in there for the last 8 years and hearing everything that they're doing wrong. Once again, and I'm reinforce what everybody has already said, that yes, they need to be paid accordingly because they are the highest educated, but yet the lowest paid. So they need a raise. When I have educators in the district that are selling their blood because they need to make extra money to be able to afford a home, that should tell us right away, we need to go to the extreme measure and increase their pay. But one thing I want to point out, because something I really believe in is, of course, is unions, because I am a union member, is the entire time we're discussing legislation which impacts our educators, guess who is not there? Guess who is not part of the conversation? Stakeholders. The teacher organizations that represent teachers, such as AEA, AEU, SOS Arizona, AFT, these are organizations that fight for public education and also fight for educators. Not one of them is at the table when it comes to this legislation. Just recently, we heard a bill that was actually going for real life teachers, meaning that if you have a real life kind of schooling, or and that could be anything under the sun, that you could get a teacher certificate. And it's like, once again, we're downgrading the teacher profession. And we see this so often where it's like, okay, instead of smarting up or dumbing down because of the teacher shortage, it's legislation like this that really undermines the teaching profession. And these are bills that are attacking our teachers. These are because they're saying, hey, we don't have enough educators. Well, tell you what, it was already mentioned. Let's stop passing legislation which attacks teachers, which attacks our educators. And one thing our educators tell us all the time, that, hey, we want parents involved with your child's education. And we need parents to get more involved in their, in their kids' upbringing when it comes to education and everything. Because educators are not saying, no, we're trying to do everything in the dark. Or no, they have always been there. They have parent teachers nights. And they said, and when parents don't attend, that already there is a breakdown. So they want to welcome parents. They want parents to see what they're learning in the classrooms. The critical race theory, CRT, which we've heard over and over again, is not taught in K-12, but yet that is one of the big pushing points to get the GOP candidates fired up. They're not doing that. And once again, parents, it's time for you to get involved in school boards and be respectful, because many times they are going into these school boards and they're attacking the school board members. Because once again, we have to talk about, there is a push by the right, the far right, that has their agenda to start attacking public education, because they believe that our educators are pushing the left agenda, the progressive agenda. Guess what? They're not. They're doing one thing, and they always ask the legislature, stay out of education. Let us do what we were taught to do, which many of them have gone to years of schooling to be able to educate our future.
And we just got another live question. Someone asked, will we get a road to cross the Agua Fria River at Thomas? Traffic was at a standstill because of work on I-10. Ms. Sun.
Which road was it? You said,
At Thomas Road,
and
the Agua Fria River.
so what was the question?
Oh, they wanted to know if they were going to get a road to cross there. They said traffic's been at a standstill because of work on I-10.
As far as infrastructure at the legislature, I think the bills had to be passed in the budget. But as far as that traffic jam in that particular area, definitely we'll be collaborating with city council members, mayor, to make sure and to address those issues, either be building a bypass to alleviate the traffic. But definitely we need to look at the infrastructure of the whole area to alleviate that traffic jam. There are far more other areas that have traffic jams here in LD 22 that I would like to address as well. But definitely we gotta look at the budget and to see where we can build bypasses, and also to realign the, for me, I always see all these traffic jams and whatnot. It's mostly about the zoning, because some of these roads are being congested because there's other factors involved, such as big trucks driving and all the congestion. So the buildings around, is it warehouse, residential, all of that has a factor in play with the traffic jam.
Mr. Andrade.
Yes, thank you, Kyra, for that question, because I am the ranking member on the Transportation Committee, and this is my forte and everything. Once again, we were talking about the budget, the skinny budget, and what was not in the skinny budget. There was no funding for transportation, zero. And luckily it died today, but something else that's in jeopardy. The legislature, the majority has failed to bring forward the legislation which increases the Maricopa County, the MAG, the half-cent sales tax extension has not been passed. I have been vocal about our public transit needs, especially here in the Valley, and as you stated here in LD 22, what's that going to do? Without the lack of funding, and because one thing we always hear about is education funding, well, guess what? We also owe HERF, which is the Highway User Revenue Fund. We owe HERF because of the sweeps over the last years. We owe HERF $1 billion. That is our roads, that is our highways, that is everything that we talk about when it comes to our roads and highways, especially in rural communities. The lack of funding has created a lot of what we're seeing today when it comes to traffic, a lot of the transportation woes and commute roles. I was very surprised to find out that we don't even have bus service in LD 22 and parts of LD 22. And when I first heard this, I was like, this is what I'm going to be advocating for once again, make it to the Senate to keep pushing, because I've been vocal. Like I said, the legislation I have introduced, a transportation and how we're going to be able to fund our HERF study committees. Because one thing is, when it comes to our gas tax, do we need to increase our gas tax? And I just want to tell everybody right now that our gas tax has not increased since the 1990s. And in the meantime, what has increased? Travel costs has increased, material has increased, labor costs has increased, but what has not increased is our funding mechanism when it comes to HERF. So now here we are faced with the transportation woes here in the Valley, and we are growing, especially in the West Valley and the Buckeye area. It's growing tremendously, and we still have a lot of 2-lane roads where we need more freeways, we need more, and I'm gonna say it, we need 6-lane roads, and our major highways, our major roads now have outgrown the 2-lane, where we now need to expand it to 3 lanes and beyond. So this is all in a nutshell. When we look at our transportation woes, it's because we cut taxes too much. And do I believe we had the money? Yes, we just need to be smarter about how we're going to invest that money and how we're going to be able to appropriate that money. So that way we're not stuck in traffic. Phoenix area is called the big parking lot by truckers.
And Ms. Chavez.
Well, thank you to the viewer for that question. I think we can all understand that frustration of when the I-10 is under construction or blocked off, especially on the weekends. We do need to examine if these scenarios happen, what are the best places where we could add bypasses or various bypasses from the I-10. Also, I believe, like everyone else was saying, we need to deal with our infrastructure. That will be part of that issue. At the federal level, they just passed the Infrastructure Act, part of Build Back Better, and Arizona will be receiving that money. And so I'm hoping, if elected, that I can lead with my other elected officials on the best ways to use the infrastructure money. And hopefully it will go to places where there are major needs in these roads where there are only 2 lanes or there's no bypass. Folks, especially when they're driving only in their neighborhoods, don't want to only take the 10 just to go 2 miles. So let's find the best solution for everyone. And also maybe in the future, ADOT could, when they give notices of closures, can also give tips of, hey, maybe you can drive down this direction, or scenarios where it'll be beneficial to everyone.
And let's stay on that here for a minute. Gas prices have skyrocketed in the last year. Arizona adds an additional 18-cent tax on every gallon of gas to pay for road maintenance and construction. Just a few years ago, policymakers were considering increasing that tax, which has been unchanged since 1991 to cover transportation infrastructure projects. Would you support suspending the gas tax to ease people's pain at the pump? And if so, how do you propose making up the funds for roads? And if not, should we increase the gas tax? And we will start again with Mr. Andrade.
Yes, thank you, Kyra. So, like I said earlier, our gas tax has not increased since the early 1990s. And what is that gas tax? It goes to HERF, Highway User Revenue Fund. That's what builds our roads. That's what paves our roads and everything. And I know everybody's like, no, it does not, because we haven't seen any improvement. The I-10 closures, unfortunately, are occurring because guess what? We're upgrading and they're repaving the roads, which need to be done. That's where that 18% gas tax comes in. When people say, hey, right now you want to raise gas taxes, well, the thing we need to also start talking about is paying our fair share. Because remember, you go up and gas up your vehicle, that's where you get that gas tax. Well, if you own an electric vehicle or another type of alternative vehicle, guess what? You're not paying. You're not paying a gas tax. So the legislation that I was talking about earlier about the study committee is also trying to investigate and find out exactly how we can make sure that everybody's paying their fair share. Because one thing I have found out, like electric vehicles, which I am a big fan of electric vehicles, weigh as much as the gas truck I drive, which is the Chevy Silverado. They are as heavy as that. And everybody says that the heavier trucks are tearing up our roads. Well, guess what? So are the electric vehicles with that type of tonnage. So we need to take a closer look and start saying, okay, in order for us all to be able to use our roads, we also need to pay into that to make sure we take care of our infrastructure. And what has also occurred with the increased gas mileage on vehicles, we're not using as much gas like we did before. So finding another alternative, and right now to say, hey, we need to cut and completely eliminate the gas tax. Well, let's talk about going to the oil companies and saying, you know what, how much billions of dollars of profit is enough? Because I just want to remind everybody that the profits of the oil companies are in the billions of dollars. So if they reduced gas by 50%, their profits would still be in the billions of dollars. So the solution would be, we need to hold oil companies accountable for the outrageous prices that we're paying, that we're seeing at the gas pumps, which is another issue which comes to the Ukraine war with Russia, who also pumps oil. That is another issue that we need to talk about, and it is federal, but yet it still impacts us at the gas pump. So there are other alternatives that we need to talk about, but without true leadership and without somebody that's really, that works in the transportation, because I do work in transportation and being a certified locomotive engineer. This is why I'm running for re-election, of course, because we need that voice, somebody who's knowledgeable about our everyday needs when it comes to transportation infrastructure here in the state of Arizona.
Ms. Chavez.
You know, I would be in support of a temporary suspension of the tax. Currently, between inflation and the prices at the gas pump, Arizona families are hurting. But like you said, how do we pay for that? I believe between the federal money that Arizona will be getting from ARPA and also Build Back Better and with the infrastructure money, that we can use those funds to pay for the roads and infrastructure that tax normally goes to. Like I said, this would just be a temporary suspension until the gas prices regulate themselves, because we know they will at some point. Just today, unfortunately, I saw 430 something, and actually that was a relief to me because it's no longer as high as it used to be. So there is, it is going down, but it is still high for Arizona families like my own and many others in our district.
Ms. Sun.
Thanks, Kyra. I think to ask for more taxes at this time will be very disheartening for the communities that are hurting. And we need to really focus on the gas gouging price, because we know that the oil barrel price is still the same, if not, it's lower. But yet, why are we paying higher prices at the gas pump? So we need to look at the regulation and why that's not being tapered. Why are we paying such high premium price at the gas pump when there's no need for it? And who is watching our, these corporations price gouging? There has to be some sort of bill or act or state statutes that prevent such act, because it kind of creates this another manufactured chaos that at the end of the day, the most vulnerable communities pay the most. So I'm not a fan of raising gas taxes at the pump. And even though we haven't had a raise since 1990, I think we need to readdress the issue of the price gouging at the gas pump first.
And looking back at the last 2 years of COVID-19, I'm interested, how do you believe Arizona managed the pandemic? And I would like you each to share one aspect of the challenges it presented where state leaders did well, and one area of mismanagement. And we will start with Ms. Sun. Oh, no, sorry, Ms. Chavez.
Okay. So one thing I felt that the state did fairly well was implementing the vaccines. The system that they had it had a little kinks at first, but I think that happened probably across the country because it was a new system. But I felt like overall it was fairly clear of where folks can go. We had these big box, kind of like these big box of centers where folks could go. We even had in our district, we had some places in Tolleson where you could get your shots, but also we had Westgate at the Cardinal Stadium where folks could just drive up and get it. It was very convenient for folks, and I think they did a great job of that. One thing where I feel like there was mismanagement was where Doug Ducey and other folks would say one thing and tell the public one thing, and then we would hear something else from the CDC or other doctors and other scientists, which led to confusion. So I don't blame folks who maybe didn't understand what was going on or didn't, maybe didn't stay at home or didn't, especially in the beginning, because they were hearing multiple different suggestions from folks. So I think we needed a clear message, which unfortunately, even still to this day, there's still not a clear message. So that's where I would say we could have done better.
Ms. Sun.
So the pros and the cons of the pandemic and how our elected officials had performed. For me, the tally is 0 for pro. For con, where do I begin? We're sitting on a surplus of $5.3 billion. How do we get that much surplus in the last couple of years of this pandemic? We've uncovered through this pandemic the most vulnerable member of our community that was left behind. Not only were they left behind, they were dying because they didn't get the resources. In our community, previously LD19, we didn't get the vaccine mobile until late May. And by then we had the affluent communities like Fountain Hills and Paradise Valley and Scottsdale and Northern Phoenix already receiving their vaccination, far ahead of our schedule by a couple of months. That's a sign of inequality. The rollout of preventive PPPs were also very unequal based on the various communities. So again, I really don't see any pros, to be honest with you. Again, I don't know where to begin. We all scattered all over the place. People were forced to stay home, but without any support. Our agencies they're supposed to come through, didn't come through because they were stranded with limited funding. It uncovered so many things. I mean, we can go from domestic violence, from addiction, people that are suffering from isolation, mental health. I mean, the list just goes on, and none of it were addressed. And yet we still sit on a $5.3 billion surplus. I'm smiling, but I'm not really happy about it. So I'll pass it to Representative Richard Andrade.
Same question.
Yes.
Okay. So I was serving in the legislature, of course, during the COVID pandemic. And one thing we need to recognize that here in the state of Arizona, and sorry, because this is a big number, 29,852 Arizonians are no longer with us. So did we step in, did we do everything in this right direction? Well, for the families and friends that lost loved ones, including myself, who lost loved ones to the COVID pandemic, we failed there. We failed to protect people. And seeing what was going on when we shut down the state, which was, to many of us was a step in the right direction, because we really didn't know, because of the onslaught of COVID-19, we really didn't know what was going to happen. We knew that it was contagious. We knew people were going to die from it. Could have we prevented a lot of the deaths and everything? Yes, because this is where the politics got in over a simple mask. The politics got into saying you're violating my freedom, my right to be able to make my own decision and everything. But what about those of us that had the right to live with safety in mind, with just a simple mask and everything? And at the legislature, as we're debating lifting, these mask bans, especially amongst schools, it was sad to see this because it was total disregard for the safety of our students, for the safety of families. When we saw, businesses, and even today we saw legislation on preventing local governments from enacting measures to be able to keep us safe by saying you cannot pass anything related to COVID to shutter businesses and everything. And once again, taking a step backwards to keep the public safe. Yes, one of the right directions, but we were also slow on this too, was the implementation of the COVID-19 vaccines. We were slow to react to that and everything. And there was really, basically in the beginning, there was no plan until they did open up Westgate, which I live and, directly across from there and everything. That was implemented, but once again, the reaction was a little bit slow. Did we really come out and say, hey, it's safe to get the vaccine? Once again, people were yelling and screaming that you're forcing me to take a vaccine. And once again, I just want to remind everyone, once again, we have people that died from this, the 29,852 people that passed away because of COVID-19. That's the evidence of, did we fail? Yes. Could we done better? Yes. Should we have reacted better? Yes. Some of the blame also has to go to the federal government because of the former administration refusal to keep us all safe. What worries me is the next pandemic. How are we going to react? Are we going to react the same way? Because many people I know and that were essential employees were still going to work. We saw the toll it took upon our healthcare professionals, our doctors and nurses. Many of them are no longer around as well. We were worried about our resources being diminished. And because we all saw the demand when it came to our healthcare system. We need to be better for the next pandemic. And instead of being reactive, be more proactive. Because once again, we saw the strain it was putting on our healthcare system. And the thing that we haven't started discussing is, what is the total cost of COVID-19? Yes, we talk about the economy, which is back and it's booming, but what was the real cost, the medical cost? That is something we're not discussing, and we need to, because that could have been prevented.
And switching gears here, Arizona has been at the forefront of voting by mail for about 3 decades. Do you support voting by mail as it exists today? And if not, what reforms specifically would you vote to enact? And this time we'll start with Ms. Sun.
Can you repeat the question again?
Yes, Arizona has been at the forefront of voting by mail for about 3 decades. Do you support voting by mail as it exists today? And if not, what reforms specifically would you vote to enact?
I mean, voting by mail is great for the state of Arizona. I believe the enrollment right now is about 90%, if not a little bit more than that. Don't quote me. But I do know that within our district, LD 22, previously LD 19, we actually have the lowest mail ballots. I think we were at like 2/3. So again, that concerns me just because the apathy that is in our community, because we're such a safe blue district. A lot of our constituents here believe that, we'll always be a Democrat and we'll always have a great elected officials, when that is not the case. So as far as continuing the ballot by mail, I 100% support, but I also like to see some sort of a rollout and bring out the awareness and the benefit of it and the purpose of it for various communities like ours in LD 22.
Mr. Andrade.
Strongly support mail-in ballots, Pebble. Uh, we're seeing the attacks even on Pebble or on permanent early voting list and voting by mail. We're seeing the attacks on it today. I have been opposed to all legislation which makes it harder to vote. I have spoken out and said, and I'll say it again, that every eligible voter that has the right to vote should be able to vote, whether it's by mail-in ballot or at the polls. And I just want to remind everybody that members of the military have paid the ultimate sacrifice to protect our freedom and the right to vote. And what are we doing? Because it all comes back down to the big lie. The big lie was, in truth, more Arizonians voted. A lot of them voted by mail. And then one audit after another showed there was no fraud in our elections. And I just want to remind everyone, because paying careful attention to our elections for the last 8 years, because running for office, we never had an issue. We never had a problem with our elections. And all of a sudden, lo and behold, we have all kinds of problems with our elections. It has worked until this last election, which was 2020. Now we have problems and we have issues and everything, but yet we never had issues on voter fraud, and mail-in ballots has always been the way to go. But not only do we need to expand it, our mail-in ballots, we need to advance and go electronically as well. And once again, we're able to keep track. As you know, you have to sign your envelope. And then when you take it to the mailbox, drop it in the mailbox. I can't believe we heard legislation where they want to put cameras on the ballot boxes. And I'm like, okay, guess what? My ballot box is at the end of the street, and you're going to put a camera over that one. So, it's safe, it's secure. We need to expand on it and make sure we open it up, because many working families like me, work multiple jobs. Yes, between being a legislator and being a railroader, many families do the same thing. And when they don't have access to the ballot box, we're going to see a drop. And we all know what this is targeting. That's targeting people in our communities, people of color, who use the ballot box, who use mail-in voting, and they have been successful and they're turning out in numbers. Now, all of a sudden we have a problem and we don't. So this is why the attacks when it comes to mail-in voting, it's an attack upon our communities who are voting in greater numbers. And we need to, like I said, once again, expand voting to all eligible voters. We owe it to those that have paid the ultimate sacrifice. Thank you, Kyra.
And Ms. Chavez.
I'm a big fan of vote by mail. I've been voting by mail for a many number of years, probably close to 2 decades now. I think vote by mail is necessary. And actually, I was going to make a quick, a funny joke, because you said as it stands right now. As it stands right now, no, because we took away Pebble. Pebble is very important. And now this is going to lead just to confusion, and it also kicks people off. People are going to, you don't vote once or twice, and now you can't get your ballot by mail. That's very unfortunate. We definitely need to be working to make voting easier and not harder. Actually, I'd probably even go a step further and say we need to go back to where we can get our neighbors' ballots and drop those off in the mail if folks choose to. When someone is just sick or they're busy and they can't go and deliver their vote by mail ballot or even put it in the mailbox, that is a hindrance that is making voting harder for Arizonans, not easier. So my number one goal is to make voting easier for Arizonans by any means necessary.
And we probably have time for a couple more questions here, kind of straddle the line an hour and a half. But I do want to get to a couple questions about immigration. So let's try that. Texas deployed its National Guard at the US-Mexico border, and there's been pressure on Governor Doug Ducey to do the same. What do you believe is the state's role in managing the border? And we'll start with Representative Andrade.
Yes, thank you. First of all, for the record, the border is a federal issue. And for the state to do what they're doing, there is no problem. we're seeing this over and over, the rhetoric, I mean, the commercials and everything that about the big invasion and everything. And I just wanted everybody to know that I introduced legislation that it's called tax fraud and for misclassified workers. What this legislation actually does, it goes after the ones that are hiring people under the table that are not eligible to work in the state of Arizona. Because what's going on in the construction industry is they'll hire somebody who's not eligible to work. They'll bring him into the workplace. If they get injured, they'll call the coyote. The coyote comes and picks them up and drops them off at the border. And once again, when somebody's here that's working under the table, why are we punishing somebody? Somebody's attracting them to come here to the United States. We never talk about the business owners that are doing this, that are hiring people here who are not supposed to be here and have, are able to work. Every day, our migrant farm workers cross the border to come to work. They are the ones that are picking our crops, because why? Americans won't do those kind of jobs and everything. So we have a program that works. We have work visas. We have everything in place that is working and which employs people, especially those from across the border. Let's start going after the bad actors, because what are they doing? They're here to make money, and they're here to make a life. And we see it every single day. All this rhetoric that we're seeing about the great invasion, there is not a great invasion. Once again, you want to build a border wall? Fine. But guess what? You can go over, under, or around a border wall. That is not going to stop. What we need is a pathway to citizenship that doesn't take years and doesn't take thousands of dollars.
Ms. Chavez.
The question was, should we have our National Guard at the border?
Just what is the state's role
What's
managing the border?
Managing the border. Definitely, that is not our role in managing the border. Our role is once they come in, to treat them with dignity. These are folks that are trying to better their lives. No one leaves their countries unless they have to, and especially at the border. So let's treat them with dignity. That should be the state's role. There's asylees that are at the border, refugees, and the state has a refugee office. Let's make sure that refugee office is funded, and that folks, so that we don't have refugees that end up homeless because they're not being taken care of once they get to Arizona. A lot of our refugee agencies are at the breaking point because they need help. We should be helping them at the state level. Managing the border, that's a federal issue. And, we can discuss what the federal should or should not be doing, but at the state level, we should be treating folks who come into this country with dignity.
Ms. Sun.
I mean, when we talk about managing the border, of course, it is under the federal jurisdiction. We don't know, as the people living here in the state of Arizona, is that every state also have its own metering system, meaning that if we have a certain allocation at the federal level, in the past, the average, give or take, is roughly around 70,000 immigrants that can pass through. And they have a number for certain ethnicity. In recent times, during the Trump administration, the percentage of people coming from Mexico to seek asylum is 4%. It used to be in double digits. And then if you are Asian, like myself, that is at 24%. Not only did that metering system number down from 70,000 now down to, I believe, 17,000. What that creates is that urgency for people to cross the border illegally. And in recent time, there was an uptake up to, I want to say, over 500%, but it was isolated in the Yuma area. And we also know that ICE contracted it with a hotel company by the name of Endeavor. And they were given federal funding for this, hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm sorry, I think it was like, it wasn't that amount, but the amount was never given to these asylum seekers to be placed in a hotel. Instead, or housed in these hotels. Instead, they were all empty beds. So where did the money go? Where was the transparency? Where was the accountability? These are just a few of hundreds and hundreds of stories that has been mismanaged, mismanaged at the border issues. So there are layers of it. And I think it's so important for our elected officials to tell us, where are the loopholes? What is going on? Who can draw us the bigger picture so that we can have a say in it, and to pressure our elected officials at the federal level to do something more concrete, because this issue goes on and on and on. And for some reason, it's not serving the taxpayer. It's just serving corporations. And going back to these illegal workers being hired by corporations that able to get beds at a lower rate. And yet it's our community that suffers because they're not paying taxes. So we don't get our community wealth. So again, all that, we need to look at it in the broader perspective, and then go into our elected officials, either be at the state or the federal, and put the pressure on the federal level to do something more concrete and to serve our community well.
Well, thank you all for participating. Now we're going to transition to closing statements, running a little bit later than an hour. But Ms. Sun, do you want to start? You have 1 to 2 minutes.
Thank you, Kara. I really appreciate the time that the Clean Election have given us today. I do want to reiterate what we all said here, is that we do want to promote community wealth. We have an elected official with us here today, Representative Andrade, explaining in details of all the questions that has been presented today. But I also ask that our community be more involved and lean in to your primary race. Our district in LD 22, only 25% of us vote in the primary because we think it's a safe blue district. Look at each individual candidate and look at their track record and see what they have done in your community. Ask the question, will they promote community wealth? Do they have a strong moral compass? Would they stay strong in supporting community wealth? And what is that means to you? Because if you don't know what is wrong with our community, it's really hard to select your elected officials. So in my closing argument, or my statement, would be that come out and vote in the primary. Here's your chance in a safe blue district to pick the very best elected officials to represent your community. And we know that whatever happens at the end of the day, you guys still have the power. Don't ever think that you don't. When we don't tell you what's going on, when we don't tell you what the truth is, that's how we steal it from you. But if you want to maintain your power, come out and vote in the primary. Thank you.
Ms. Chavez.
Well, thank you for having us tonight. I'm sure there was many more questions we could have, topics we could have discussed. And I look forward to spending more time with the voters and discussing more issues. So like I said in the beginning, I'm running because I want to bring change to our district. I want to bring change to leadership. I think we are past time to get some new voices in there. Also, speaking of community, I will definitely be someone who has an open door to community. I think it's I think we definitely need to make sure our community is engaged, and like Lisa said, know what the issues are. And also, as a woman, I want to have my voice in there. I think it's due time to have a woman have a say in our district. It's been close to a decade that a woman's represented our district. And so in the state house, you can vote for 2 people. So I hope you'll will consider me as one of your 2. And please visit my website, natashachavez.com. Thank you.
Thank you. And then we'll hear from our Senate candidate, Mr. Andrade.
Thank you, Kyra. Thank you for the Clean Elections for hosting these debates, because this is where voters get to learn where we stand on certain issues, and in many cases on our knowledge on certain issues. But to learn more about me and my priorities, please visit Andrade.org, because we need a blue collar worker who, like many of you, we must work. As I say it, we live it every day, and as I get close to retirement, I realize how important it was to have a job that had benefits such as healthcare and a pension. I am an uncompromising on my democratic progressive values, and I fight for people, not special or corporate interests. This is why we need a change and send a strong message. We do not need more Hurston Cinema Democrats for those with the same ideology, because what has it done to address public education, the lack of affordable housing, homelessness, which has increased by 35% from last year. The current leadership that serves in this district, where are they at now? Why are they not here? That is questions you need to ask yourselves and say, hey, do you want real representation? Is it time for a leadership change? Yes, it is. Because one thing I strongly believe in, that we need women voices on the West Valley. Because in my former district of LD 29, I recruited 2 young progressive Latinas to run for office in that district, which is now LD 24. Because we need women voices at the legislature, and which is why I'm supporting Lisa Sun and Natasha Chavez, because we need them at the legislature. Each one of us, when we first get elected, we know what we need to fight for. And staying strong as progressive Democrats has always been one of my priorities, to understand the needs of our communities. And that's why you'll see me at the doors, not only this election cycle, but every election cycle, which is every 2 years, because I want to hear from you, and I want to talk to you directly and learn what the issues and some of the challenges you're facing, so I can better represent you. Why? Because representation matters. And once again, please go to my website at richandrade.org. Have a great evening. Thank you for doing this once again to Clean Elections, because here are the real voices that are going to speak for you and fight for you. I will not be silent. I am vocal and will remain vocal. Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes our debate. To our candidates, we thank you so much for participating. To the voters, we thank all of you who took the time to watch the debate and inform yourselves before the August 2nd primary election. As a reminder, the voter registration deadline is July 5th and early voting begins July 6th. All registered voters, including independent voters, can participate in the primary. We encourage you to visit azcleanelections.gov for official, accurate voting information. Thank you.